There's nothing sadder than watching a beloved celebrity or public figure get into a crazy scandal that completely ruins their image. But there's also nothing more satisfying than watching a piece of shit celebrity or public figure get into a crazy scandal that also ruins their image, or whatever image they had left. But there's also that weird in the middle where a celebrity that you don't really care too much for, but don't really hate too much either, gets exposed for some really wild stuff. And that description fits pretty well for Diddy, aka P Diddy, aka Puff Daddy, aka Love, and unofficially right now known as P Diddler. In recent months, Diddy has had a list of lawsuits and accusations longer than Santa's naughty or nice lists. He's gotten accused of wild stuff from SAing employees to human to R-wording fellow employees, and much more. Now, Diddy was at one point one of the biggest superstars and entrepreneurs on the planet. He was one of the very few rappers who was also a billionaire, along the likes of Jay-Z, Kanye, and Dr. Dre. Which is pretty wild because even as a huge hip-hop fan, I have never heard a Diddy song before in my life. Nor do I know a single Diddy fan. Like, seriously, does anyone actually request Diddy on Aux? No, I don't think so. But he's a name that people know. Diddy was one of those household celebrities that everybody just simply knew. And now he's being known for probably the reasons that you really wouldn't want to be known for. And even with the atrocious amount of legal issues that he's going on right now, this is far, and I mean far, from his first encounter with the law. So, I thought it would be fun to go over them all. Diddy's first legal trouble started all the way back in 1999. Nas and Diddy were filming a song for their collaboration Hate Me Now. In the video, Diddy wears a crown of thorns and poses crucified on the cross to represent Jesus Christ. Diddy approved of the final cuts of the video, but changed his mind right after. Diddy is very religious, but was worried that this would come off as offensive and really did not want the video to be shown. So he personally asked Nas's manager, Steve Stout, to have the scene completely removed. However, the video was already set to go, Diddy approved of it, and Sony dropped $14,000 on the crown alone just for that scene. So it was a little late to ask for big changes like that. Now, why Diddy asked Nas's manager to get the scene removed is beyond me, because honestly, Steve had no power in making that happen. And Steve himself said that he couldn't promise any changes to be made, so I don't know why Diddy was so dependent on that. The video aired with the crucifixion scene still in there, and Diddy was pissed. Diddy and some of his goons went straight to Steve's office and gave him a one-way ticket to Pound Town. Steve claims that Diddy and his henchmen beat him up so bad that they were just simply a couple punches away from ending his life. My jaw and head were all swollen. I couldn't move my arm. It was a traumatic experience, and in the middle of it, I didn't know exactly how to feel. I was upset, embarrassed, scared, angry, and as far as I'm concerned, this was an attempt on my life. The only reason I'm not dead is because they missed. And this was over a simple scene being included in a music video that, again, Diddy approved of and blamed it on a person who had little control over it being removed. The next day, Diddy was arrested and Steve sued his ass. But it was settled right after Diddy gave him $500K to forget the whole thing, and that was that. I mean, honestly, I don't blame Steve. I would have done the exact same thing for $500K. But in federal court, Diddy pled guilty and was sentenced to 1 day of anger management classes. So he was basically let off the hook. But his clean slate didn't really last long, because later that year he was arrested for a shooting that occurred in NYC, which also involved Diddy's ex-girlfriend Jennifer Lopez and fellow rapper Shine. Apparently Diddy and Jennifer Lopez used to date. I didn't know that. Now, it all started when Diddy got into an argument with some other guy at a club, and it got pretty heated and shots were fired, literally, and caused 3 people to get injured. Right after the incident, Diddy, Shine, and Jennifer all left the club and led the police on a pretty big chase throughout the city. The police caught up to them and found a bang bang in Diddy's car. One of the people who was injured from the incident claimed that Diddy was the one responsible for the whole thing. And Diddy was also accused of bribing his driver to take the blame for the weapon in the car. Diddy and Jennifer were acquitted with a defense from a lawyer that was actually so stupid that it worked. I don't know if you know this, Judge, but this person, Jennifer Lopez, is a very famous actress. To think Mr. Combs is walking around with her with a loaded gun, it's so ridiculous that it stretches the imagination. Yeah, that got their charges completely dropped. However, Shine wasn't really so lucky and was sentenced to 9 years in jail, and also claimed that Diddy sold him out just to save himself. When Shine got out, he actually ended up dissing Diddy on a song over the whole thing, and is still pretty bitter about it today. Whether Diddy was guilty or not, he got off scot-free again, and got off scot-free again in 2001 when he was pulled over for driving with a suspended suspended license. In 2003, Diddy's clothing brand Sean John was accused of heavily mistreating their workers in the Honduran factory. Workers claimed that they were not allowed to speak or even use the bathroom during working hours. They had to go through body searches, and women had to take involuntary pregnancy tests. Any of them that tested positive was fired on the spot. The supervisors were extremely abusive and yelling at them all day, every day. It was extremely hot during the day, and the drinking water was apparently contaminated. They were being severely paid and severely overworked, working 11 to 12 hours a day, but only earning 15 cents an hour. And on top of those low-ass wages, the banks were apparently surcharging them $33 per week, which made it very difficult to afford basic things like food and shelter. And by the way, these clothes were not cheap. The shirts alone would go for about $50 a pop. When the workers carried out a strike against the inhumane conditions, the owner of the factory promised that they would be met with much better conditions, and then turned his back around and fired all of them and blacklisted them so that they couldn't find a job anywhere else to feed themselves. Now, it's very likely that Diddy had no idea that this was happening. Even as a founder and face of the company, there's only so much you can actually do in terms of hand-on supervision. But it's not a good look for you or your brand when accusations like this come about. Charles Kernigan, a spokesperson for the National Labor Committee, was the one who brought all these issues to light and demanded that Diddy take action. And sure enough, Diddy did launch an investigation into the entire thing and made sure that changes would be made. Kernigan himself confirmed that Diddy did make changes and kept his word. Diddy added AC, water purification systems, and fired all of the abusive supervisors from the factory. Diddy did the right thing at the right time, so maybe there was some good in him, but his other cases say otherwise. In 2003, Diddy was sued by former business partner and Bad Boy Records president Kirk Burroughs. Diddy was trying to convince Kirk to sign over his stake in the record label over to Diddy so that Diddy can have full ownership. But Kirk didn't want to. So Diddy tried to convince him the way that any smart businessman would, by threatening to beat him up with a baseball bat if he didn't sign over his stake, and also apparently withheld millions of dollars from Kirk. But the lawsuit was dismissed 3 years later because the statute of limitation expired, so there was nothing that Kirk could do. Diddy completely denied this was true, claiming that it was pure fantasy. But not too soon after that, he was sued by television host Rogelio Mills for attacking him. Back in 1999, Rogelio asked Diddy to do an interview, and he agreed. The interview was going well until Rogelio asked Diddy a question that he did not like. Now, just to give some context, at the time of this interview, there were rumors circulating around that Diddy possibly had something to do with the death of Biggie Smalls, aka the Notorious B.I.G. However, there's like literally zero evidence of that being even remotely likely. Biggie Smalls' death was still pretty fresh, and his killer was still never found. And without a killer being named, people started to create these crazy conspiracies as to who possibly could have done it, so they started looking at almost anyone who was associated with Biggie Smalls. And people suspected the man with the money and the power who signed Biggie Smalls in the first place, Diddy. Again, no evidence though. When Rogelio asked Diddy to comment on these rumors, Diddy went sporadic and just ended the interview altogether. Diddy did not want the interview to go live and offered to buy the tape off of Rogelio, but Rogelio refused. But Diddy was not going to take no for an answer. So Diddy and his entourage went up to Rogelio, took his camera, and smashed it completely, as well as attacking him in the process. Rogelio did not want to sue, but he only did because Diddy never responded back to him. However, Diddy ended up winning the lawsuit anyway. In 2015, Diddy was sued for trying to beat up his son's football coach. This is where things just get ridiculous. Now, Diddy's son was an official player for the UCLA football team, and like the loving father that he is, Diddy wanted to attend one of their practices. Diddy felt the coach was targeting his son a little too hard and wanted to go talk to the coach in his office to have a little chat. And by have a little chat, I mean beat the fuck out of him. As security was trying to remove Diddy from the office, Diddy picked up a kettlebell and swung it at one of the interns. And if you've seen a kettlebell, those things can do some damage. The coach had scratches all over his face and his shirt was completely shredded from the incident, but Diddy was let go because there wasn't enough evidence. In 2017, Diddy was sued again, but for this time, it wasn't for something violent. It was for sexual harassment. Cindy Ruella, who worked as a personal chef for Diddy, sued over the terrible conditions. She traveled with Diddy wherever he went to cook him meals and often worked overtime without receiving compensation. And oftentimes when she served food to Diddy, it would be right after he was done you know. So often she would walk in on some sausages, and I'm not talking about the hot dog department here, which is pretty inappropriate for a worker. One of the people who was in charge of employing her offered to settle this by offering her compensation if she signed an NDA, but it was written in a very confusing way. She asked if she could get a lawyer's opinion on it, but she was told that she cannot share this information with anybody, otherwise the offer would be completely taken away and she would be fired immediately. So she agreed, but she still had conditions that were not met. She specifically stated and agreed to the condition that she would not travel because she had children that she had to take care of, but she was still forced to go on trips with Diddy to cook him meals, and sued him. The lawsuit was settled out of court 2 years later, and she was paid an undisclosed amount. Hopefully it was a good amount. So with the long list of all these crazy ass cases, how has Diddy gotten away with all of this? Well, every single time he was either found innocent or basically paid his way out. He's gotten some slaps on the wrist here and there, but nothing that really constituted as a real punishment. And besides, what's a couple million for hush money when you're literally a billionaire? He'll just make some solid investments and make it back the next day. Well, recently that's where his luck started to run out. All of his hush money and power was not going to get him out of the trouble that he was facing real soon. In the span of a couple months, Diddy was slammed with not one, not two, but 4 lawsuits that accused him of some pretty horrendous stuff. Now, the first was when Diddy was sued by his ex-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura. Their relationship started in 2006 when she was 19 years old and he was 37. Just a little age gap, you know, no big deal. And what started as a sweet romantic relationship turned into a living hell. Diddy and his inner circle controlled every aspect of this girl's life. By being the one who paid for her car, her apartment, her clothes, and everything else, he basically was the one who can make himself have the power. He would physically beat her often and would just straight up do it right in front of his henchmen, who wouldn't say anything because he wouldn't speak out against their boss. In the lawsuit, she claims that one time Diddy saw her speaking with another talent agent and got so pissed that he started kicking her in the face repeatedly to the point where she started bleeding horrendously and had his staff hide her in a hotel room. Another time, they had a falling out while in a hotel room and Diddy gave her a black eye. And while she was trying to run out of the hotel room, Diddy was throwing glass vases at her. It was all caught on security footage, but Diddy slid them $50K to delete it. And anytime she tried to leave him, Diddy's henchmen would always bring her back with or against her will. Diddy provided her with a ton of drugs that he persuaded her to take. She took more and more to try and dissociate from the horrors of their relationship, which caused her to get addicted. She started with simple stuff and then started doing everything in the book. Like, you name it, she did it. According to Cassie's medical records, which Diddy also had access to, she suffered from pretty bad memory loss and also attempting to take her own life. I wonder what caused that, but it gets worse. Diddy would often force Cassie to do it with other men while he pleasured himself to the act of it, all for his sick enjoyment, even though she always never wanted to. This would happen as frequently as once a week, and Diddy would film it and even force her to watch the footage sometimes. Now, Cassie used to date fellow rapper Kid Cudi before she dated Diddy, and in the lawsuit it says that Diddy straight up blew up Kid Cudi's car as part of some type of weird jealousy act. In what world that makes sense, I have no idea. Cudi himself confirmed that that was true and actually happened, but there's still more. In 2018, he reportedly forced his way into her house and R-worded her repeatedly while she screamed no. To say this lawsuit is insane is an understatement, because of all the lawsuits I mentioned earlier, this one easily beats all of those. Yet this lawsuit was settled literally a day after it was filed. 1 day! All of that was settled so fast. Now, it doesn't say how they settled it, or better yet, how much Diddy paid her to drop it, but Diddy basically got away with it again, until the next 2 came. 1 week later, he got hit with another fat 2 lawsuits, one of them from an anonymous woman that claims that Diddy and singer Aaron Hall assaulted her and her friend back in Aaron Hall's apartment in 1991. In the lawsuit, she claims that her and her friend met Diddy and Aaron at a fancy event. They were being flirty, chatty, laughing, having drinks, and soon enough, they invited them to go back to Aaron's apartment for the after party. Wink, wink. And that's where the assault occurred. Oh, and I forgot to mention, the woman who filed this lawsuit at the time was 16 years old when this happened. The other lawsuit came from a woman named Joy Dickinson, who accused Diddy of assault and some other things. Now, Joy met Diddy back in 1991 when she was a college student. She worked in the music industry and also had a pretty similar friend group to Diddy. He asked her out several times, and she said no each time, but then reluctantly agreed to give him a chance, which was a terrible idea. The lawsuit claims that while they were having dinner and she went to the bathroom, he spiked her drink, took her home, and that's where the assault occurred. But what's even worse is that he filmed the entire thing and gave the tape to other people in the industry to watch. Now, this right here constitutes as revenge porn, which is a very, very serious crime. She claims that this whole thing heavily sabotaged her chances in the music industry and made her want to end her own life. Now, unlike the one with Cassie, these two lawsuits are still ongoing. And not even 2 weeks later, he was hit with another lawsuit accusing him of also assaulting a woman. This woman also chose to be anonymous. She claims that she met Diddy when she was 17, which is high school age and underage, by the way. And she was introduced to Diddy through one of his friends and record executive, Harvard Pierre, in Detroit. Diddy took a liking to her and convinced her to fly with him on his private jet to his studio in New York City. She thought it was a cool idea and agreed to do it. But before they left, Pierre forced her to do particular things to him before they were able to get on the private jet. I'm not going to say what those things are, but you can use your imagination. And once they flew from Detroit to the New York City studio, they gave the 17-year-old a ton of drugs and alcohol. And that's where the two of them took turns assaulting her. Now, Diddy responded to all of these lawsuits the exact same way. Well, not him personally, but his lawyers definitely did. They claimed that every single person who filed these lawsuits was just simply trying to get a quick cash grab from a famous and successful superstar. Diddy was silent, but then eventually addressed it through an Instagram post. Enough is enough. For the last couple of weeks, I have sat silently and watched people try to assassinate my character, destroy my reputation, and my legacy. Sickening allegations have been made against me by individuals looking for a quick payday. Let me be absolutely clear. I did not do any of the awful things being alleged. I will fight for my name, my family, and for the truth. Sean Diddy Combs. I mean, hey, he convinced me. But even with such an extremely convincing and very heartfelt post, it was still not a good look to have 4 back-to-back sexual harassment lawsuits. And this started to have a very heavy effect on all of his business ventures. Now, around the beginning of all of these lawsuits, Macy's announced that they were going to stop selling Sean John clothing through their online stores and their in-person stores and completely end their relationship with Diddy. They claimed they were doing it because Sean John wasn't as hip and cool as it was in the 90s and 2000s, but I think we all know why they actually stopped. I mean, if it wasn't gonna stop selling then, it definitely was gonna stop selling now, that's for sure. And considering Macy's was the sole retailer for the brand sportwear, this was pretty bad for the Sean John brand. Diddy was set to have an exclusive reality show with Hulu that would document him and his family's everyday life, but that was completely scrapped. At the same time, 18 different brands severed their ties with Diddy's e-commerce company, Empower Global. The Grammys were reconsidering inviting Diddy to the ceremony, even though his album was nominated for Most Progressive R&B Album. But Diddy never ended up attending, which honestly was probably the smart decision. He ended his business relationship with alcohol company Diageo, which owns Ciroc and DeLone, which is some of Diddy's biggest investments. He even stepped down from Revolt TV, the cable network he himself founded, which is one of his most successful business ventures. This was getting bad for him because now his bank account was really starting to suffer. But hey, I mean, it couldn't get any worse, right? Wrong. A couple months later, Diddy got hit with probably his worst lawsuit yet. This lawsuit came from Lil Rod, a music producer that worked for Diddy. He produced 9 songs on Diddy's latest album, the same album that got him the Grammy nomination. And while recording the album, he lived with Diddy in various cities in various countries through the whole process. And during the 14 months, he claimed that he witnessed and experienced some pretty intense shit. It started off as weird but not super harmful stuff like Diddy just casually walking into the same room as him without any clothes on, but then it escalated pretty badly. Lil Rod claimed that on multiple occasions Diddy grabbed him in certain areas, and he also claims that rapper Young Miami straight up assaulted him right in front of Diddy and they didn't do anything about it. And this is where it gets really disgusting. He also claims that Diddy brought in particular workers to fornicate with that were underage, and would also give them laced beverages. Lil Rod himself claims that he was also assaulted multiple times. Not to mention, some of the other people involved in this lawsuit is Diddy's oldest son and some very big record labels that Diddy is involved with, such as Love Records, Motown Records, Universal Music Group, and much more. Lil Rod claims that the record labels conspired with Diddy to make all of this stuff happen, which classifies it as a RICO case. Now, when it comes to crimes and cases cases, RICO cases are up there in the ones that are taken the most seriously. RICO cases usually refer to crime organizations like the mafia or drug cartels. Lil Rod is accusing these labels of working with Diddy to basically provide the underage workers the drugs and the weapons. And he claims that at the time of this happening, that if he spoke out of any of it, he would have been blackballed from the music industry and would have not been paid for any of his work. By the way, he actually still hasn't been paid for any of his work, apparently. But what really took the internet by storm at the time was the people that weren't explicitly named in the lawsuit. Two of the people that Lil Rod accused of assault in the document both had their names redacted. But on the footnote, we see that one of them refers to a Philly rapper who dated Nicki Minaj, and the other one performed the Super Bowl and had a successful residency in Vegas. It doesn't take Sherlock Holmes to figure out that this is Meek Mill and Usher. And let me tell you, the memes that came from this were absolutely hysterical. People were bringing up a bunch of old tweets and memes from Meek, like the one where he straight up said this D good as hell, or the one where he's rapping in the club next to Diddy and they're both looking at each other like they're about to get freakier than a circus in the bedroom. People pulled up an old video that Usher posted to his Twitter where him and Diddy are like extremely sweaty, like as if they just went through an extremely hard workout, but there's like zero gym equipment or anything else in sight. So hints at something here. It got to the point where people started to say no Diddy instead of no homo, and there's like a ton more. Now, there were more people that ended up getting listed on this case, like Cuba Gooding Jr., who was listed as a co-defendant. Lil Rod accuses him of doing some pretty nasty stuff as well, and Cuba Gooding Jr. does not have a clean legal history, especially with assault, so not too surprising. But there were also other celebrities named in the document, like Prince Harry. But let me clarify, even though Prince Harry was named in the document, he actually was not accused of doing anything listed here. A lot of people tried to spread the narrative that Prince Harry was involved in doing some of these atrocious things. He's not. He just simply attended some of Diddy's parties and was a friend of his. It doesn't actually mean he did anything. Now, this lawsuit has already done a ton of damage to Diddy, but it could do a lot more considering he is going for 30 million here. Now, in addition to being a producer, Lil Rod was also a videographer, so he was required to capture a lot of the activity that was going around in terms of making the album. So all of the illegal and up shit that's listed in the document, he claims that he has hours upon hours of footage for, and as always, his team completely denied it. And on top of all this, Lil Rod sued for a different incident that occurred in 2022. It occurred at one of the recording studios. Apparently, Diddy got into some heated argument with someone, and it got to the point where shots were fired, just like the 1999 incident. In the heat of the whole argument, the man was shot in the stomach. Lil Rod claims that Diddy forced him to lie to the police about the details so that he can cover himself, and also is accusing the labels of having terrible security. One of the other people listed in this lawsuit is Brendan Paul, a basketball player for Syracuse University, and soon after the news came out, he was actually arrested in an airport for drug possession but was released on bond. Now, the real sign this was all going downhill for Diddy for real was when his house got raided. The SWAT team burst into his home, seized a bunch of his phone's devices, and took Diddy and his son away in handcuffs. It was never specifically stated as to why his house was raided. Maybe it's the cases we already know about, maybe it's some other stuff that we don't know about, but through various sources, Homeland Security says that this raid was simply the tip of the iceberg. Diddy surprisingly actually acknowledged the whole thing, claiming that the raid was an excessive use of military force. And then he just kept on posting on his Instagram like usual. Like as if nothing happened. But this is so far everything that has been happening with Diddy. Assuming he's guilty, then there is a very, very unlikely chance he's actually going to get out of this scot-free like how he has in the past. Even though he's a billionaire, sometimes you just can't buy your way out of certain troubles. Now, even though this video went pretty long, this is simply just a broad summary of everything that has been happening, because honestly, there is much more going on legally that I didn't even begin to cover here. I guess we'll see how it all plays out, and also how many documentaries come from this. Shalom.